Many of you must realize the scope of your life, the expanse of your life. Like some of those times in your life where it really does feel like you have failed. That's your Father's chastening or his correction. Don't despise it. And don't become sorrowful with his correction. No need to do that. He corrects because he loves. Because he's not willing to lose you. See, oftentimes we would have been lost by our own actions and deeds and what we really wanted, but the Lord didn't suffer us to be lost, did he? He has maintained your faith in him this whole time. Despise not his correction. There's something else in the book of Proverbs that it states. And don't become weary with his correction either. Don't become weary. Never say, please don't say this phrase again to yourselves. Because it is your Father that corrects. And he does so as children he loves. If he did not love you, he would not correct you. You would prosper in every evil thing you put your hands to. He saw fit not to have you prosper to those evil things, didn't he? He saw fit not to have you prosper in things that would have led to your departure of the faith. But he corrected you and kept you. It did not work out for you like it did for everybody else, so don't become jealous of them. A time approaches quickly. A time when the world will have no answer. They will scratch their heads. They're trying desperately right now to explain everything they can explain. And some things have no explanation. They're going to reach a point where they are absolutely lost. Be patient, because at that time, they're going to look to you. They'll find you. They're going to want to know what you have to say. They're not going to go to the world's experts. The world's experts will have failed them, because they'll be left to their own devices, which is nothing but absolute failure. But they will start coming to you, so be patient. Take this time that the Lord has given all of us. Learn as much as you can learn. Try to gain wisdom as much as you're able to gain. When the time comes, the world will be in great distress. Nations will be in distress with perplexity. To be in distress is one thing, but to be in distress with perplexity means you have no solution. Absolutely no solution. That's a scripture in the Word all of us are familiar with. Nations in distress with perplexity. If it would have just said nations in distress, we've been there before. But when it says nations in distress with perplexity, that means they have no answer. That means there is no scientific reason things are happening the way they are. That also means science is going to fail. And when this supernatural element is introduced, by and large to most people in this world, it's going to shock them. Many will be frozen with fear, and all faces will gather blackness. It'll be like the life ran out of people. For the world, one of the scariest things is to not have an answer. Right now, if you don't believe me, any public thing you look at, they're trying to find an answer. But they won't have one for what's coming. It is you the Lord will put the peace in. So maintain yourselves now. Accept this correction, even the pains in your bodies. Whatever the medical mishap is in your life, understand it's purposed. In a lot of cases, it's purposed to keep you in one spot. Purpose to keep you from going too far out into society too early. The Lord will introduce you when he is ready to introduce you. But he already knows that we have ambitious hearts, and we would go out there. If we were in perfect health, we would have done a whole lot more than what we're doing. The Lord slowed you down on purpose. The Lord sat us down. Don't despise it. Understand it. Understand that many of us have sicknesses and all these different things going on, not to kill us, not to destroy us, not to torment us. In a lot of cases, to keep us still, to keep us in one place, to keep us from going out. Some of you, if you would have had your health and your youth and all this other stuff going on, you would have corrupted yourself to a great degree by now. The Lord said, no, he's preserving you. He can quicken you. He can restore any of the years you have lost in your sicknesses, in your problems. He can restore all of that. And he will restore all of that when the time comes. But he's not going to lose you. Why do you think knowledge is pouring out? Everywhere you turn, knowledge is pouring out. Not just any knowledge, but actual godly knowledge is starting to pour out now. I've noticed that more and more and more. It bears witness in the soul of each of us. It's not some common word either. Have you noticed that some things that come forward are not common? It's almost like you haven't heard them before, the way that they've been spoken, but that they've been that way since the beginning, and how could we have missed that? These are times of training, of learning, of growing. So when the Lord does release you, you have an answer for all those who will come to you. Remember those things. Don't despise them. In fact, if you go over Proverbs 3, you're going to find out something about your life and God's correction and his blessings. It is a very good teaching, and we're going to go over that one day. I like Proverbs a lot. I tried to go over Proverbs one time before, and nobody really understood. Their minds were not there. Nobody's mind was there. And it was a lesson for me to don't do things based upon what you think anymore. Right? And it happened that way, too. It went through one ear and out the other. It was like the next day, nobody remembered having a study on Proverbs, and nobody remembered any of the key points because something happened to him, and nobody took the advice that was in Proverbs. Not one person. But that lets you know something. Even God's timing. He sets up a time when you can actually take in what he's speaking. There really is a time and a season for all things. And right now, I tell you, the timing is for self-reflection, for the truth of why we're here, what the Lord is doing. He's disclosing all this to us. Satan also is disclosing things to attempt to get your attention solely upon those things of the world. But we have to be balanced. There's information coming forward from the world that will just bedazzle you, but believe me, that's all it's going to do, because it offers no solutions for your life. See, I don't know about you, but something I enjoy is when I hear things that contain righteous solutions for life. In other words that explain the Father's heart toward us in any given situation. I love those words. I love the words of instruction. And I've learned over my life to embrace wisdom. Wisdom does not always come with kindness. It comes with a lot of controversy. It demonstrates a truth, not half a truth. So you're always going to see light and darkness when wisdom speaks. But if you don't, turn away from it, but in fact face it. You gain a richness in life that nothing else can impart to you, a completeness. Many of you may not be complete right now. You may be full of anxieties and have insecurities and not very trusting in things. And I tell you, it begins with turning toward wisdom, not away. Look into your situations and begin to see the Lord in the situation. Begin to identify the principles of Christ in the situation. Once you do that, and you will find Scripture in everything you go through. You'll see a cause with everything you endure. Realize the Lord is working with you in a loving way. For some children, you can simply say, no, don't touch the cookies. For other children, you almost have to strap them down to a chair. And all children are different, thus our lives. They yield different things. We have different trials and tribulations designed just for us because of our characters. Some of you are outgoing, and you had to be strapped to a chair. So your situation may be worse than the other person's. Some are timid. And if you told them to go grab a cookie, they wouldn't do it because they're timid, afraid of their environment. The Lord does something different with that situation also. With all those cases, ultimately, we're becoming what the Lord has sent us here to become. I hope the reading of Proverbs, it ignites something within you to take another look, a fresh look, to see the truth of those things in your life so they won't be a burden, but a blessing. Because there's nothing like seeing the Lord in your past. If we look in our past and we start regretting everything, that's actually looking back at the old man. It is. If we begin to desire, past times and things, that's also a sign that our day is dead. But if we look back into the past and we can see the Lord in our past, that's actually worship. I look back in the days all the time to see how the Lord delivered me out of things. I don't blame anybody for anything in my past. I've already assumed all responsibility. There's some unfair things that have happened to me, but I assume responsibility. Hint, hint. In other words, it's not anybody's fault anything ever happened in my life because I've assumed that responsibility. I don't look in the past to blame anybody. Even if somebody blatantly did something, I still won't blame them because I know they would not have the power to do anything against me unless the Lord gave it to them. You remember what Jesus told Pontius Pilate? You wouldn't have the power to do what you're doing unless God had given it to you. So what you're doing is purpose for me, which is purpose for all the children. That's what he was telling them. So everything in your life, in order for evil to overwhelm your life in any way, God had to give it power first. Some people are so in the flesh, they take offense to that statement because they are still yet flesh in the mind, in their hearts. Spiritually speaking, you're not the flesh. Those of you who walk by the Spirit can't wait to get out of the flesh. Not because it's getting old or breaking down or any of those things, but because it desires evil things. Because you're prone to its desires all the time. Because it's constantly having to eat or having to drink or something is not going right. It's so susceptible to too many things that will slow you down from doing the work of the Lord. That's why you despise the flesh, because it produces no good thing. Now, if you're like that, you're kind of like myself. I don't like the flesh. I can't stand it. A lot of people didn't understand that at first, but now that they're getting older, they're starting to see it. It's the same yo-yo syndrome type thing with the flesh. You have a lot of people who are trying to preserve their flesh. not understanding. The process of flesh and the spirit are intimate and important. It's important that your flesh not be anything like your spirit. It's important that your flesh be as corrupt as it is, because you gain strength of spirit to override the flesh. And your choices, when you choose a spiritual thing over something you're so familiar with and comfortable with called the flesh, you have really made a stride in your faith. That's important. Nothing of your life was ever allowed to happen due to a vain reason, but everything is highly purposed. Highly purposed. I mean, highly purposed. Some of you, if you had not had your flesh tainted, you would have trusted in the flesh to this very day and likely promoted flesh rather than spiritual things. You would have been an advocate for dark things, not things of light. But because your flesh is tainted, you couldn't praise your own flesh saying, oh, I'm so pure in the flesh. You can't say that because it's tainted. But you can grow spiritually. It took you a while to develop that mindset, but you did. Everything in your life is purposed. Please know that. Please know that.